Okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm only seeing 5 people, but I'm sure you're all there. This is the next in the detail webinar celebrating our RIAS Special Category Award Winners 2026. Our awards this year were judged by Chris Dyson, Owen Hopkins, Ailey Isa and Anna Liu, who shortlisted 14 buildings and awarded 10 winners, with a further 5 special award winners. So this is the first of our In Detail series, and please head to our RIAS events page if you would like to sign up for the next 4 weeks of Wednesday webinars. Today's webinars will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel shortly. You can already catch up with the first 4 sessions via this way. This week, we are delighted to be joined by Bennetts and James Nelmes from Bennetts Associates, who will be giving us an insight into the fantastic Edinburgh Futures Institute, and I will introduce them fully later on. EFI was also the winner of the RIAS Laurence McIntosh Award for Architectural Interior, as well as the RIAS TCM Capital Innovation Award. And we are also joined by David MacDonald and Chloe Martyn, representing our generous sponsors. So just a reminder that this session will be recorded and will be shared afterwards. And there is also a Q&A button at the top of the screen, so please use this to submit any of your questions through myself. So I'd firstly love to introduce David MacDonald, representative from Laurence McIntosh. David MacDonald joined Laurence McIntosh in 1984 and has played a pivotal role in the company's growth and evolution for over 4 decades. Appointed director in 1996, he has been instrumental in shaping the business, focusing on principal contracting and the delivery of exceptional high-end architectural joinery and bespoke cabinet-making projects. Under David's leadership, Laurence McIntosh has strengthened its reputation for quality craftsmanship and technical excellence. And in 2017, he oversaw the company's move to a purpose-built, high-specification workshop, significantly enhancing production capabilities. He has also led the development of the company's CAD department into a highly experienced technical resource, providing valuable design stage support to architects and project teams to ensure seamless project delivery from concept through to completion. Welcome. David, I'm just going to ask you a few questions, if I may, and to allow you to introduce yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of Laurence McIntosh? Oh, you're on mute.
Apologies, Libby. Can you hear me now?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
No, thanks. We've been on the go for now approximately 80 years, starting as a small joinery company in Edinburgh, based in the centre of Edinburgh. But primarily over the last 30 years, we've been developing our joinery skills, which link in with our principal contracting skill set. We look at every project with an eye for what amount of joinery is involved in the project. We've got a large workshop here which is able to cope and to service all those principal joinery contracts, as well as becoming involved in individual bespoke joinery packages for larger projects. So over the years, we've developed quite a strong team. There's 25 people in the workshop, bench hand joiners, cabinet makers, CNC, wood machinists, polishers, traditional and contemporary finishes. And our CAD office is 7/8 people strong, able to look after projects of various sizes and skill sets. So we're very fortunate with the people we have working with us.
Why is it that you think architects like working with you so much?
Because we're great people. No, I all that joking aside, we enjoy our work. We really do care about our work, and whilst we understand we may know a lot of the practical and technical things that go into work, we love listening to new ideas and seeing how that can work. Working alongside architects and designers to realise their concept and take it through and to make it work. And the interface between other trades is so important to sort of understand as well. And we try to offer a collaborative approach and a friendly approach, because there's always issues, there's always problems you've got to work out. It's how you go about it. We really do welcome people to the workshop to go through things, samples, and see how it works and the finishes. So it's really important that we can offer that service.
Yeah, and the collaboration. It's fantastic. Why did Laurence McIntosh sponsor the awards? Why did you become involved in this? We're obviously very grateful.
Well, no, I think it's really important. You have to realise where you are in the food chain. It's as simple as that. It's important for us to become involved. One, because we love what we do. We get great pride in seeing a finished article, a finished project, and understanding how that came about. One of the major projects were the Glasgow School of Art, for instance. The entire team of who were on that project, we were doing the library. It was fantastic to be involved in it from the very start, the modelling, the sampling, the discussions, how it went together. And that same approach applies to every project. And it's fun. It's really great fun when it all comes together.
Brilliant.
And sorry, to answer your question, it's because we enjoy it. We want to keep encouraging people to produce wonderful interiors.
Fantastic. Well, we're very grateful. Thanks very much, David.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our second sponsor is Chloe Martyn, co-founder of TCM Capital. With nearly a decade of industry experience, Chloe co-founded TCM Capital to support businesses in the built environment, particularly architects. She specialises in helping clients unlock valuable funding through tax relief, such as R&D tax credits, capital allowances, land remediation relief, and energy incentives. Over to you, Chloe. I think you're going to tell us a bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for the introduction, Libby. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. As Libby said, I'm one of the directors at TCM Capital. Yeah, for anyone who isn't familiar, we help innovative businesses across the UK and Ireland access government funding. So much of our work is around the R&D tax relief, but also some of those other services that Libby mentioned. We've worked with architectural practices for many, many years now. And one thing we've consistently found is that it's an incredibly innovative industry, but many architects don't necessarily describe what they do as innovation. I think when people hear research and development, they often picture people in laboratories or technology companies. And, you know, in reality, innovation in architecture is well, it's in many things, but it's solving complex technical problems. It's designing within planning and heritage constraints, improving sustainability, and just finding new ways to deliver challenging projects. And so what we do at TCM is we work with architects to help them understand if and how their projects might be applicable for the R&D tax relief. And our in-house engineers then support them through their claims from start to finish. A couple of years ago, TCM Capital and RIAS worked together to introduce the Innovation Award. We both recognised there was an opportunity to celebrate something that sits at the heart of the profession, and that's the innovation. So this is now the second year of the award, and it's been fantastic to see the calibre of the projects being recognised. This year's winner, the Edinburgh Futures Institute by Bennetts Associates, is a brilliant example. They've transformed a former Royal Infirmary into a modern university building while still preserving the character of a Category A listed building, which obviously requires an enormous amount of technical expertise, collaboration and creative thinking. I know they're going to tell us a bit about the project shortly, so I won't go into it too much. But personally, I was fortunate enough to be shown around the building by Cara, one of the architects at Bennetts Associates, and she's worked on the project from the start and is clearly very passionate. And you know, seeing the building's one thing, but hearing firsthand about the design challenges the team faced and how they overcame them, it gave us an even greater appreciation of the project and what had been achieved. And it was a real privilege to see the project through the eyes of someone that helped bring it to life. So yeah, if any of you watching today are ever in Edinburgh, I'd really encourage you to go and have a look around at the building. One of the things we loved the most actually was the Latin inscription above the original hospital entrance, which is, and excuse my mispronunciation of the Latin here, but patet omnibus, which means open to all. And this has actually been retained, and it feels like a fitting reminder that although the building has been completely reimagined, it continues to welcome the public just as it did when it first opened. So yeah, I'm delighted that today's session is going to give you all an opportunity to hear more about the project from the team behind it. Thank you very much to RIAS for hosting this session. Congratulations once again to Bennetts Associates. And I'll now hand over to Rab and James from the Bennetts Associates team.
I think I'm just going to do a brief introduction.
Sure.
I mean, thanks so much, Chloe, and thanks so much for sponsoring the awards. So a little bit about James and Rab. Having met at Edinburgh College of Art in 1970s, Rab and Denise Bennetts formed Bennetts Associates in London in 1987. An Edinburgh studio followed in 1994, and the practice has been working more or less continuously for Edinburgh University since 2003. Initially with the Doolan Prize-winning Potter Row development, followed by the Edinburgh Futures Institute. Rab and Denise stood down as directors of the employee-owned trust in 2019 and are now based in Edinburgh, although Rab continues to work on a major project in the City of London, which very interested to hear about, perhaps another webinar. James Nelmes joined Bennetts Associates in 2004 and is the director of the Edinburgh studio. However, he has worked on numerous projects across the practice, including Jaguar Land Rover's main design facility near Warwick and a major project in India. Like Rab, he has worked with the University of Edinburgh for many years, but has also recently completed Citizens Theatre in Glasgow and the Edinburgh King's Theatre, which is due to have its first major public performance this Friday. Congratulations. Thanks, Rab and James. I'll hand over to you. Many thanks.
Great. Thanks, Libby. I'll just share the screen. I think Chloe's done a very good job of describing the scheme for us, actually.
There we go. Okay, so I'm going to kick off and then James will describe how the scheme was designed in the middle, and then I'll finish off at the end. And you can see immediately from this slide what an amazing building it is. It's an absolute Rolls Royce of a hospital in its day, extremely large, and it took 9 years of our lives. I think it's fair to say James and I were there from the beginning, as was Carla, who was mentioned earlier on. But we worked out recently about 30 architects in the practice had worked on it at one stage or another, plus another 9 from the conservation architects, which is quite a roll call. So let's push on. That's obviously the title of what we're doing today. And this is a very brief introduction to what we do. I mean, I won't go into it in detail other than to say it's a huge variety of work, from offices in London, like the one on the bottom left, to the middle at the top, which is a theatre in Hertford. It's just been shortlisted for the Sterling Prize, we're very pleased to say. And the bottom right here is one of the Jaguar Land Rover studios in Warwick. So it's a practice of a great range of different types of work. Now, getting to the Royal Infirmary, well, obviously, David Bryce was the architect. I mean, he's the sort of high priest, if you like, of Scotch baronial. And it's the most extraordinary confection. I mean, as are several of other buildings. They're somewhere between a French chateau and a Scottish castle. And this was his original painting. And of course, it's not a flat site, as shown here. It's got buildings on the other side of the road, which is Heriot's School. It had railings all the way around the site already, and a gatehouse which pre-existed the building, and none of that is shown. But it's nevertheless quite faithful to the original vision, except for one thing, which it has more turrets and towers on the roof now than was ever the case at this painting. And the reason for that is it had the most extraordinarily inventive wind-driven ventilation system, which ran through all the floors, up the turrets, out through towers on the roof. And you might see one or two of those in the slides later on. So it has an overlay of functionality and engineering, which is extraordinary. The location right in the centre of Edinburgh, as you can see, I mean, the original first ever infirmary was over here in, believe it or not, Infirmary Street. And it was quickly outgrowing its site, so it moved to a site which now overlooks the meadows. And at that stage, it was the edge of the city. But you can see how big it was. It had a medical hospital facing the meadows, and it had a surgical hospital facing Heriot's and to the north. The rest of the site eventually became a hospital extension of the hospital too. And the whole thing is now part of the quarter mile development, which was developed in the early years of this century. The plan, the original plan, looks like this, and you won't be able to see the words, which is just as well because it's upside down to the writing. But the most striking feature in the middle is this circle, which says ice store on it. And we never found it when we dug down there, so we don't know if that was ever built. But the rest was built almost exactly as per the plan, with 20 wards, more or less the same shape, each of which had a turret at the ends for bathrooms and things like that, and a nursing station at the inboard side, which we call the knuckle, as it joins the main corridor. So 4 wards to the north, 2 to the south, but over several levels, 3 on the north and 4 to the south. And right in the middle, of course, is the clock tower, which is the centerpiece of the composition. And that's what it looked like. We've got lots of old pictures of how it was. And this is roughly, we think, about 1908. But you see these Nightingale wards were very beautiful spaces. They were tall, well ventilated, good daylight, 1 bed per window, obviously ergonomically spaced out with lighting in between, and the nursing stations at the end of the ward to service it. And it must have been rather good when the piano got going. But of course, it had seen better days by the time we got to it, and the building was very damaged by the time the post-war period came along. I mean, NHS, when it took over, didn't need planning consent for things like this, even on a listed building. So things were added all over the place, including wards on the roof in portakabins, windows which were botched like this to add corridors and so on. And so when we came along on the front side, it looked rather better. I mean, this is on the north side where the entrance was, and the gatehouse and the railings basically said keep out. So nobody used that main entrance at all. So the inscription Patet Omnibus, open to all, is barely visible there. But of course, very few people used that entrance at all. They used accident and emergency around the side of the building instead, and that's how most people in Edinburgh remember the building. Inside, it was in a terrible state. The water was pouring in and had been for over a decade since it was vacated. And they'd been neglecting the building, to be honest, since the 1990s, when it was known they were eventually going to move out. And there were patient records, there were syringes and cupboards, there was medical equipment everywhere. And the wards, many of them had been disfigured like this, with suspended ceilings, some air conditioning and additions, which really made them unrecognizable. So we had to strip all that out, and we started by getting rid of the extraneous extensions and blocking in openings which were otherwise going to be dangerous, just left like that. And then I thought at that point we should start thinking about what is a Futures Institute. So James, over to you.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, okay. So I suppose what was a little bit different about this project, I mean, any architectural proposition is a sort of negotiation of a site, but also a brief. And in this instance, those things didn't come in series. And the challenge of the building, we were able to sort of get on with de-risking, getting on with some of those demolitions and strip out contracts at the same time as developing the brief with the university. And maybe the first thing to say is that the Edinburgh Futures Institute is an entirely new institute within the university. And truth be told, they didn't actually know what it was when we started out on the journey. So it took several years as we were sort of doing all this work to the building. The university was thinking away and thinking what actually is an Edinburgh Futures Institute. So really what it sort of comprises is a raft of different types of function. So there are teaching and learning spaces, so study space. There is research space, that's academic research, but also sort of third-party research as well. And then the third element in the mix is external partners. So what that means is startup companies, but also established businesses, public sector organizations, and even sort of third sector NGOs. So there's really quite a mix of people within the building. I think later on, this is Marion, who is now the director of the Institute. She sort of dubbed it as radical interdisciplinarity. People have talked about sort of cross-discipline working within higher education for some time. But this is really quite different in the sense that it isn't people working within, say, a field of data science, bumping into each other and developing ideas. This is people from very different worlds. So people like Police Scotland are in the building. There are fintech startups. There are creative industries people within the building. And all of them sort of overlap with one another, and they can develop teaching programs or research programs with each other. So it's really quite a different sort of mix of people. The thing that binds all of them together really is that what they are focused on is the big challenges facing society today and in the future. Okay, so having looked at the building and the site, and then having also sort of helped develop the brief as we went, we came to sort of the point where we're thinking, okay, what is the challenge here? Is the sort of conceptual response to those things? And this was very early on. It was a sketch done by a colleague, which we thought really it sort of still encapsulates everything. The building was originally designed as a Florence Nightingale hospital, which was all about separating people and separating the spread of infection. So it was a building designed for isolation. However, the brief and what the university's desire was the exact opposite of that. It needed to be a building entirely about integration. So how were we going to take this existing building designed for isolation and turn it into one all about integration and the sort of, I can't remember who coined it, one of us coined the phrase about the contagion of ideas. The other point, or another part of the puzzle really, was the role of the building and the university within the city. So the University of Edinburgh is a very, very large estate. It owns 430 buildings, coloured there in sort of pale pink, what's kind of described as the central campus. And in the darker red, that's really sort of what's sometimes called the cultural string of pearls for the Royal Scottish Academy, the National Gallery, the Central and National Libraries, and the Museum of Scotland, and running all the way up to the sort of university area. And this building, the surgical hospital, sits really at the crossroads between sort of the university's world and the city world. And the university wanted this project to form a new sort of front door to give a sort of identity to the university. If you're going to put on the front of a brochure or an image of Edinburgh University going around the world, this was to be it. And so one of the very sort of early concepts really was the creation of a civically scaled space at the front of the building. So the clock tower with its kind of incredible kind of composition, reopening that front door that, as Rab describes, has been closed for something like 60 years, creating a new civic space, which meant one of the more challenging things that we sort of discussed with listed buildings and historic environment Scotland was the removal of the gatehouse at the front. So that allowed us to create this space where they can hold events and sort of reform this big new front door and a new identity for the university. The ways that we went around sort of tackling, sort of fitting the brief in and creating a sort of flexible and adaptable building, we, as Rob touched on, we did a sort of series of judicious demolitions. So a lot of the accretions that had come over time with the NHS were removed. And we then sort of back in their place, we made a number of insertions, and there's maybe sort of three key ones. There are, if I'm just going to my little cursor, there are new blocks that sort of slip into the courtyard spaces, and they can house bigger sort of more adaptable types of spaces. The corridor was doubled in width, so it becomes a sort of central street and spine. And then the third element was the creation of a new, very large event space below that civic square. So it's a sort of space that holds 450 people seated. So those three sort of big moves really helped us work with the building, but unlock its potential and to turn it away from that being about isolation and into a building about integration. Many of the spaces we worked through, all the fit out of the spaces, they're all really about flexibility. So looking at the interiors, how can we create volumes and spaces that can be used for all different types of pedagogy, from traditional sort of seminar and lecture layouts to more sort of modern fusion teaching, as it was described, where there are many people in the teaching space online. In the work areas, in a sense, this is maybe sort of things to a degree are bread and butter, but looking at how you create sort of collaborative spaces, how you create deep work spaces is often sort of focused work where people want to be private, or looking at shallow focus, which is more sort of typical open plan type of work. So I'll just run through the drawings of where we got to with the design before the construction. So you can see here the location plan, point about Laurence Place and the sort of home of the university here at George Square, the Edinburgh College of Art, which is also now part of the university as well, at the sort of other end of Laurence Place, and that sort of spine of the city that runs all the way through and into Middle Meadow Walk, and then located right at that junction is the Edinburgh Futures Institute. The section cutting through the cross towers is a cross section going through the clock tower. Like many of Edinburgh's buildings with our wonderful topography, you actually enter the building in the middle of the section. So you enter in the 2 floors below you and 2 floors above. You can see everything here highlighted in red is new. So the creation of the new big event space below the civic square. I'm just move on. Long section going the other way. So this is cutting through 4 of the wards. Each of the wards at each level takes around sort of 50 to 60 people, depending on what mode it's in. The larger infills that you can see in elevation here in blue, each floor they take around 120 to 150, so double the cohorts. And then the large space, as I mentioned at the bottom, is around 450 seated. This maybe shows you how much work, I'll show you some photographs in a minute, but how much work actually went into sort of stitching everything back together. So everything there in red is new. We had to rebuild something like 50% of the building. So all the timber floors were rotten. They all had to be pulled out and rebuilt. All of the walls and linings, the lath and plaster, again, had to be removed and rebuilt. So there was a tremendous amount of construction that people perhaps don't realize. These images show a little bit of that. So it was sort of classic woolly jumper where you pull on a thread and the whole thing just falls to bits. And it felt like for several years we were just sort of going backwards rather than forwards. The challenges, as I mentioned, around things like rot, but also there was a lot of work to do with stabilization. So something like the second week of the project, the entire back wall of the building tried to fall over. The new structure, those corridor inserts, their structure was adapted so it actually props the back of the building up. But there was a point, of course, there's a turning point when you start going forwards again and putting these spaces back together. And in so doing, we were able to sort of improve the sort of performance, thermal performance of the buildings with breathable wood wool insulation, and eventually getting back to the sort of proportions of the original ward and the wards which you saw in 1908, which had been lost completely under the NHS's auspices. In terms of services, the building is plugged into the university's combined heat and power plant. So there isn't actually sort of a heating plant on site. However, there is pipe work for distribution to bring sort of heating to the building. With such a kind of incredible skyline and roof line, we needed to avoid putting plant on the roof level. So the distribution is all done at the lowest of the basement level in a sort of walk-in trench that runs the full 150-meter length of the building. And from there, it sort of pops up into each of the wards. I should sort of mention that most of the building is naturally ventilated. So all of the ward spaces and the sort of street space, corridor spine, are naturally ventilated. It's only the sort of high occupancy spaces that need to be mechanically ventilated. There was a tremendous amount of conservation work. As Rab touched on, we worked with Consart Design Group from Belfast, who are absolutely fabulous. The roofs were all reslated, all the lead work was redone, much of the stone was sort of damaged stone was replaced, lead work, finials, and even sort of down to gold leaf. Yeah. You can see there one of the wind chimneys, which was for its time a very advanced natural ventilation system, which was wind driven, that drew air through the roof voids from all of the wards. 6 of those wind towers had been demolished by the NHS, and we rebuilt those, and they are now actually the exhausts for some other plant. As part of the conservation works, Consart looked to make sort of certain improvements, so particularly rainwater goods which were replaced, lead safes were put in, telltale hoppers. So a lot of the trouble that buildings of this kind are having at the moment is this sort of increase in intensity of rainfall that we're receiving today, and that's due to increase. So adapting buildings to be able to survive the predicted changes to the climate over the next 100 years. Off our own back, we undertook an embodied upfront carbon study, which is this is sort of a RICS-aligned study, which if you are feeling very nerdy, you can follow the QR code in the corner there and read it all in detail. And the sort of short story is the building actually performs very well. We were a little bit surprised about this. I think if we were coming to it today, not all of the structures would have been concrete. Certainly the one at the back needs to be for structural reasons, but we probably would have been using more timber. But irrespective of that, we've ended up in a very strong position with 361. That's actually pretty good going. Okay, I'll pass back over to Rab to show the pretty pictures.
Yeah, that's for me. And this is obviously the front of the building facing Laurence Place. And you can see without the gatehouse, without the railings and gates, it's a completely open space. And what you might have spotted in the original photograph is there was an enormous flight of steps up to the front door where it said open to all, but of course a lot of people couldn't make it up the steps. So this has been manipulated to make sure there's a gradient all the way from Laurence Place up the sides of the square, then it turns at right angles towards the door, and the steps were taken away from the building, pushed out 3 meters to create a landing, and then reduced in number. So there are actually 5 steps there, not the original 10, but it means you can ramp up to the top landing without any difficulty whatsoever. And the first space out of the door there, which is flat for performance reasons, is flanked on either side by glass boxes which reflect light down into the space below. So it's a space for Edinburgh. It's always open. There are no gates on this, so you can come in at any time of day, and you obviously see people skateboarding at certain times too. That's obviously a model of the space, showing how the big hole underneath is lit by these devices on either side, and there's a very light structure, but mainly glass, and the glass panels in the center are baffles, which are translucent, and they bounce the light down in a way that a clear glass wouldn't do. So it's actually a very good daylit space most of the time, unless it's blacked out, of course, and you wouldn't realize you were in some sort of subterranean space at all. So here are the glass boxes with a couple of posers on the right-hand side for scale. And you can see that what we've got on the left-hand side is the square is at level 2, one level up from the place where the slide is taken. The space where the light box stops is level 1, and then level 0 is the floor of the space inside of it. And here's the space inside. So it's an enormous structure. It's 18 meters square. So it's got similar characteristics, according to the contractor, to a bridge. And so they brought in engineers to do pre-cambering and things like that to make it settle properly. And we wanted to make it visually a bit lighter than the beams might have suggested. So we split both the columns and the beams into pairs like this and used that as a kind of lightening device as well as a light fitting. And I think the results are really successful in the sense that it doesn't look heavy. If you look up between the beams, you can see a slab partway up, and that is halfway up the size of the beam. There's a top slab where the square is on top of that. And we've included theatre equipment in here too, so they can have it as a flat floor with all the seating retracted. And we've had dance performances and things like that in it. And you can see the amount of daylight in it is good on the left and the right-hand side. And there's a few details. Now, the battles that I mentioned are translucent. They reflect the light, but they also correspond with the stairs from the mezzanine at level 1. So there are drinks receptions and the like on the level 1 mezzanine straight down into the hall, or you can enter directly from level 0, which is, of course, ground level on the south side of the building. The building has been used by the Edinburgh International Book Festival now. It's the 3rd year coming up, starting in a couple of weeks' time. And this is one of their slides showing when they black it out like a theatre. It's very versatile. They can drop some of the lighting down lower, and it takes the 450 that I mentioned. They bring a stage in their own particular way, but it's a very different type of space. The other new spaces, of course, are the ones between the wards, the pavilion spaces, as we call them, seat about 150 or so at the most. And they're very transparent to the north. You can see Heriot's School in the left-hand side. You can just get a glimpse of the castle in the right place and so on. And they're 12-meter clear span from back to front, very flexible, and they have access to catering like the main space too, so they can be used for all kinds of things. There's a little bit of cooling in here, as there is in the main space, but there are also opening window panels, which you can see either side of the glass here. The wards are many and various. As I said before, there's about 20 of them, and they're all done as a neutral backdrop to allow the occupiers to do whatever they wish. So this is a setting for a workspace, basically, but others are done in lecture format or hybrid format for fusion teaching with part seating, part on the screen. There are actual workshops for things like digital printing and making things, which is great to see in the same building. And of course, the whole point of this is people mingle in the big corridor spaces to exchange their ideas. And here are those corridor spaces. Now, it's open access, which is a bit like a public library. You can't get into the individual wards necessarily. They're controlled, but all the public spaces, like the corridors and some of the pavilion spaces between the wards, are open. And we find quite often that the kids from Heriot's School come over here to do their homework before being picked up by parents later in the day. So it's a very lively space. The original corridor was vinyl on the floor in grey or white, and a suspended ceiling above. And when we stripped all that out, we found these huge stone slabs below the vinyl, which we didn't over there, and we found vaulted brickwork above, which is delightful. And so we couldn't resist exposing them to view. And as James said earlier on, the lath and plaster was also rotten. All the lath behind had dry rot in it, so that had to come off, and we found ourselves looking at stone walls. Not Rolls-Royce stone walls, if you like, just regular rubble stone walls in some cases, but we've exposed them too. So the texture and colour of the space is quite unique, and it does engender a sense of informality in the way the hospital didn't do. Now, one other feature of the slide on the left is a little bit of colour at the top. with green. Now there are 6 wards which join onto this corridor. Each of them has a different color. So there's a reddish color, a purpley color, a yellow color, and so on. So you should get a sense of orientation up and down the building. And of course, it enlivens the space with the black, with the backdrop, which is constant, which is this dark blue you see on the left. The right-hand slide shows where a new staircase has provided views to the end of the spaces at either end, both the west end and the east end, and you can see turrets on the inboard side of the wards done in stone, and we've just left them as landmarks, if you like, on the journey along the building as well as vertically. There's some more pictures of the pavilion blocks looking out at Harriet's, and you can see on this particular one on the right, we're on the second top floor here. We've made a gap on the right-hand side, a double height space, so you can see the wall in stone of the ward going down 2 stories. And a few more of the corridor spaces. Now, all these little seating areas are nabbed very early in the day. There are some which only seat 1 in cubicles in spaces where there had been a duct hidden in a wall. We just made it into a workspace, and others where there are meeting spaces, as you can see on the middle side. And people tend to get in quite early to get the best spaces. So it's not just people working in this building who come, it's people from other parts of the university as well. And you get a decent idea of the texture of the stone floor on the right-hand side. The backdrop color that I mentioned in the corridors and the vertical circulation is this dark grey blue, and we thought it was a particularly appropriate color for showing public art. There's quite a lot of that already in the building, but the university has a big public art collection, and we hope they'll put some more things up in due course. This was a temporary work of art during the festival in its first year, but we also had to display donor boards, which are they were there right from the beginning of the building. There was a list of donors in gold script with a sum of money against each one. So Queen Victoria, it was shown, gave £250, and various other people gave up to 1,000. And right up to 1993, they were recording these names as donors to the university. Now, there were 70 of these panels, and most of them were rotten, but couldn't save them. But we did save about 10 or 15, and they are in the main staircases at either end of the building and in the main hall. So that backdrop color is suitable for these donor boards, which are generally black with some kind of a colored frame. And then just to finish off with a few things about its relationship to the city, the Laurence Place pavement, which you can see on the left-hand slide just over the fence, it's very narrow and not particularly pleasant. So we doubled the size of it by adding a path on the inside of the railings. And then we were able to ramp down at compliance levels of gradient to the spaces between the wards and around the other sides of the building with some simple landscaping. All the trees, of course, are new as well. And on the right-hand side, you can see where that central corridor, where we doubled it in width with a new extension, that new extension breaks through the east facade here and the same again at the west facade. So you get some spectacular rooms at the end of the corridor looking down Middle Meadow Walk in this case, or onto the Quarter Mile estate at the other end, with a little amphitheatre of steps making the change of level. The pavilion between the wards looks like this on the right. So it's 3 levels above the garden plus a rooftop pavilion, which sets in from the edges, and there's a close-up of the ramps on the left. And just to close, there's a series of images of what it looks like mostly during the book festival. So the green space to the south of the building is actually allocated for future development. It would have had 2 blocks of flats on it, but the university were able to buy the plot of land for future expansion before the flats were built. So the facade you see here would never be seen quite like this. It would be seen in gaps between larger buildings. But while it's there, and probably for several years as well, it's going to be used for the book festival, and it's temporary buildings. So the book festival uses the big space inside, it uses the smaller spaces quite a lot too, but this is where they have the temporary theatres and pop-up buildings, which is great. So it's extremely lively. So I recommend you come along in August, middle of August, and you'll get access to the building as well as the events, assuming you buy a ticket. And again, just as a summary slide, it really is an enormous project. And as I said before, it took 9 years. I mean, the university bought it in 2015, had an architectural competition that same summer, and off we were up and running, and it was finished in 24. So this is a great view looking over not just the hospital, of course, the surgical hospital as it's called, but you can just see in the background the new development, mostly master planned by Foster's, and some wards in between them facing the meadows. So the old medical hospital was converted to residential sometime before. So that's a pretty quick summary. We're very pleased with the awards we've got. We're very chuffed with RIAS, as you can see, almost right at the top there. And we hope there'll be some more. So sorry for the bragging right at the end, but I couldn't resist it. And there we go. That's a list of consultants and other key people at the bottom.
Thank you so much, James and Rab. That's fantastic. I'm not seeing any questions in the box at the moment. Have I got full visibility, Joe? It just says I don't have access to only some panelists can see questions, so I'm not sure if that.
No, you should. I don't think there's any in the Q&A box at the moment, but
Okay. Well, I have a couple,
yeah.
if I may. My first one, but David and Chloe, you might want a bit of time to think about it. Was just really to ask what are your favorite parts of the project? David, I'm presuming it's some timber element. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I think it's a fantastic innovation from the architects, the light that lets into the whole. When I arrived in Edinburgh 42 years ago, we used to maintain the old walls, horrendous. And then at the very beginning, we were asked to remove the chapel for Sir Robert McAlpine. And then, as a consequence, we were actually engaged to do all the windows to the Futures Institute with Concert. So for the last 42 years, that building has played a big part of my life. And to see it, what it is now, my son and daughter jump across the road and do their homework in the rooms, and they love it, as do their friends. So the whole building is a fantastic reintroduction into Edinburgh life, and what has been done with it is a credit to you guys. Well done.
Absolutely agree. Chloe, what about yourself?
Yeah, I agree with David. I think it's the innovation behind it all. From looking around the building, I really enjoyed seeing how the old was blended in with the new. You know, it's so often these days that we forget the natural features of these beautiful old buildings, and we focus on kind of, you know, stark contrast with bold new materials and whatnot. So yeah, I think walking through it at times, it was difficult to tell kind of where the original building started and the new ended, sorry, and the new buildings began. So yeah, I think that was the overall for me.
Could I just add a comment to that, because I think I should have mentioned this on the way through, but the existing building, of course, had hugely tall floors. I mean, mostly 4 meters plus, but there's one about 5 meters. And our decision early on was to align anything that was new with those levels, not to try something clever like mezzanines or split levels. And that definitely was a good decision looking back. But what I would say as a result of that, what we've got is a series of volumes and shapes which are quite unlike anything you would get with a new building. It's because we've kept the building that it's got a sense of innovation about the nature of the space itself. It's a very rewarding building to wander around, and people just marvel at it. I mean, we're astonished at the reaction from the public to the building, but it's partly the generosity of the spaces which makes it so unique.
Absolutely, it's wonderful. I've been fortunate enough to lecture in, I think it's 415.
Yeah.
I would lecture in, so there's no doors on the seminar space, and it's just such a lovely space to be in. And interestingly, I've lectured in traditional procurement for a sala, and it was so good to be lecturing that subject in a traditionally procured building. And I wonder whether you could comment at all on, I mean, because really it's something of that size. We've certainly not, as a practice, seen anything in the last kind of 15 years of that scale being delivered traditionally. And I wonder whether you could talk about that, whether you felt that approach, obviously you were dealing with the existing listed building, but whether you felt that approach added to the quality or benefited in any other way.
I could say a couple of things.
Yep, far away.
Yeah, and I suppose what I'd say first of all is Atkins acted as contract administrator, so we weren't contract administrator. If I'm being totally honest, I think on a project of this complexity and scale, if we had acted as both roles, we would have been struggling. We'd have needed an entire separate team just to manage the contract admin with a traditional contract. But there's a number of reasons really that the university chose to go down the route of traditional, one of which was really around risk. So as Rab mentioned, we did quite a lot of work before the main contract was let. I think in actual fact there was something like 7 contracts in total, because even with that amount of de-risking, it was felt that the market wouldn't really be able to handle this as a D&B contract.
Yeah.
Most contractors would not want to come to this, and there were so many unknowns. So in a sense, there is other ways that we could have managed it, but traditional, in that sense, allowed the university to kind of keep control. It allowed the design team to keep working for the client, I think we normally would try to say that the contract form shouldn't dictate the results, but I'm not sure it could have been delivered any other way, actually.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, down south, to be honest, we would not have used a traditional contract. There's enough people around who could do construction management or something like it. So that's not the case in Scotland. It's a different market. And by de-risking it, by getting rid of the asbestos and quite a lot of the dry rot, not all of it, and getting the demolitions properly sorted in advance, it exposed the shell of the building to the incoming contractor about as completely as it could have done. I mean, we still had some surprises. The amount of dry rot was more than we expected. But Balfour Beatty won the contract by a very detailed proposal, and they were very good to work with, actually, quite collaborative. It's with the kind of market there is in Scotland, it's about the whole project is about 120 billion. It's difficult to see how else it would have been done, and actually it went very well, and everybody is friends at the end, which was a terrific achievement for something so challenging.
Thank you. That's good to understand. I've got loads of questions. Has anybody else? Does anybody want to?
I've got a question actually, Libby, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I suppose linking it back a bit to R&D tax relief. So one of the reasons that HMRC have this incentive is they hope that businesses will take on these challenging projects and learn something new from it that they can take into future projects and drive innovation forward. So I'm sure there's probably a number of lessons that you've learned from this project, but what would you say is the biggest one that the team took away and has then carried forward into subsequent projects?
I'm not sure there's one single one, Chloe. There's maybe put them in different camps, the sort of lessons, but one of the lessons from an academic side was within higher education, 10 years ago, we were probably talking often about sort of spin out and breakout spaces. So you would have teaching spaces or research spaces, and you'd be creating breakouts adjacent to that. This project, in a sense, is kind of taking it another step forward. So that central spine, and this is part of the innovation, I think, really that's the most important bit. It's nowadays almost like the breakout space that's the main point of the project, and the teaching spaces and the wards plug into it, and so that is almost like a bit of a flip. So that's sort of, I guess, an academic innovation or change that we've seen over time. There's then probably a number of technical innovations as well.
Yep. Like insulation of the external walls was really taxing. We had an idea that we pursued for quite a long time for a type of plastering on the wall, but it was far bigger in scale than the technique could work with. So we ended up with this wood wool breathable insulation instead. The other one, of course, is the calculation of embodied carbon, which we've done for many years, actually. I mean, we first did it in about 30 years ago. We were doing the early stages of a project down in Bath, and we started calculating embodied carbon then, and it's gradually got more and more sophisticated. And we have relied on tax breaks for innovation for 20 odd years, I think now. And it's been very, very helpful to us because we do a lot of innovation naturally. We don't seek to do it just to get the tax break. We actually, it's something we want to do, and it's part of our DNA, if you like. So yeah, very, very happy to have the tax breaks.
One of the tiny,
absolutely,
tiny geeky one I could probably say as well was the use of BIM software, in our case Revit, having a full Revit model built for us at the start, but then a second one. So after all of the strip out, after all of the demolitions, we then had a second. We had to do it again. And that is quite an investment for the client, for the university. It's a lot of money to do that, but it was absolutely, we could not have done this job without that Revit model having been built the second time. And that's definitely something we have carried forward. So the King's Theatre down the road, we've done the same thing. And that is, I think that's been a sort of key innovation in a digital sense. To the point, actually, we built a sort of rendered digital twin, because at one point the university had talked about, could they from the other side of the world have students sat in Singapore walking around the building in the digital twin online and entering real-time teaching.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, that's great. I imagine because the project was going on for so many years, technology available probably changed along the way, and that's sort of, I guess, challenging to keep up with as well, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We sort of sometimes show a diagram, which we might have done actually an interview showing the different rates of change. So how cities change, the rate the buildings change, the rate the fit out changes, and the rate the technology changes is, incredibly rapid. So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, the point about flexibility is key to that. I mean, if the building hadn't been designed to be adaptable to various uses which were changing over the same period, it wouldn't have worked. And so the university was finalizing the ways they wanted to use the space right at the end. So it would take them as long as it took us to work out how best to use the building. And the flexibility was key. And I dare say in 20 years' time, looking back, it'll be different again.
Oh, Libby, we can't hear. We can see your mouth moving, but we can't hear you.
No. Yes, that's it.
Still,
there we go.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a question in the chat box now. It's could the old gatehouse have been retained whilst creating the new civic presence, and has the material been reused?
If you take the second part of the question first, the whole gatehouse was rescued. It was put on sale for anybody who wanted to buy it. Nobody did, but it's in a warehouse somewhere. So it was dismantled and kept ready for reuse, and I think still exists. It was definitely a controversial decision, and we had a few objections to removing the gatehouse. But at the end of the day, I think most people saw the benefit of having a much clearer space with an open aspect of the street. And I think if you imagine the space with the gatehouse still in place, it wouldn't have had anything like the same impact. And it was also perilously close to the excavation we were doing beneath, although we could have adapted to that. So the gatehouse itself it predated the building. It wasn't designed by Bryce, and it always looked like a bit of a misfit. I mean, it's in the style of a suburban villa, strangely, and definitely didn't go very well, in my opinion, with the grandeur of the main building. So there was an architectural case for saying it didn't really fit anyway, even though it was slightly older. So we made the case to HES, and they accepted that the case was for a change of identity, which had great value to a major institution like a university. So I think it would be a different user. The planner's reaction might have been very different. The developer did try to convert it into flats at one stage, and then a hotel, and got a planning consent for that, but eventually just sold it on, and the university bought it. But the planners were very willing to help the university achieve this change of identity and change of direction, which brought them along rollers and praise. So I think overall, in my view anyway, getting rid of the gatehouse and the gates opened it up in a way that wouldn't really have worked in the same way without that.
Thank you. There's no other questions there. I've got another one. Just quite interested in the wind chimneys that you rebuilt. Presumably, were they originally part of a stack ventilation system?
Not quite. It was wind driven. So I actually find this fascinating. It's a little bit difficult to describe without a sort of image to show it. But each of the ward blocks in each corner has a stone, I'm going to call it a stone duct, that runs up the outside of the building, and it's sort of integrated into the composition, so it looks like a little, each has a little roof, and it steps out, it's called out at each level. So every single level in each corner has its own isolated duct. That went up to the roof level, and then the wind chimneys at the end of each block, no matter which direction the wind was coming from, it would sort of draw the air through the roof space and up through those stone ducts. So every ward had a totally isolated natural ventilation system, and even all the little things that you see on the turrets that look like ducats, they're actually balancing flues for that ventilation scheme. So I mean, it was kind of, as we sometimes describe it, as like it was a stone Pompidou centre in its day. But we did actually just speak to HES about a potential research project about whether or not we could bring that sort of somehow bring that back in. But no, we haven't. I mean, in this day and age, with sort of conservation of energy requirements, the building sort of needs to kind of close its envelope slightly more during the colder months. But it is still naturally ventilated.
I mean, there are quite a few Victorian buildings of that era had this kind of system, either buoyancy driven or wind driven and so on. I think Liverpool main town hall is a bit like this and so on. And it was a technology which was well discussed in papers at the time, but we don't actually know if it worked. And part of the research project, which we'd love to have done, but never quite got round to, was to do a thermal model, a wind-driven thermal model of this thing to see if it actually would have worked in practice. In the end, of course, we didn't need this extra ducted system. We're not talking about cross-contamination like a hospital. We're just talking about simple ventilation for spaces to work in. So as a symbolic gesture, we terminated the services which did need a vent at the top of these towers, but they're not actually wind-driven anymore, but they're good on the skyline.
No, it's fantastic. Well, that's us coming up to time now. I just want to say congratulations, and it is absolutely exceptional building. And thanks so much for taking the time today, and to Chloe and David as well for taking the time to come and talk to us. It's just been a privilege actually to be part of this. So thanks so much.
Thank you, and thanks for the recognition. We really do value it, actually.
Good. So this concludes today's In Detail session, and thanks again to everyone for coming along and for sharing questions. Next week we have Natasha Huck along to speak about the Preston Tower. This was the winner of the RIAS Equitine Project Architect of the Year, and we hope these sessions will encourage learning and others to submit buildings for the awards panel next year. Thanks so much again, everybody, and everyone for attending, and see you all again soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.